Hello everyone, I'm Mr. Cheeves and today we are making Jello inside of Blender. This doesn't require any add-ons, but be warned, full disclosure, this can be a kind of frustrating tutorial. It took me quite a while to figure out. I don't know if there's a better way to do this, just be warned, this is rather advanced and can take quite a bit of time. So, with that out of the way, let's hop into Blender and I'll show you how we can do this. First things first, we need a cube, and a plane under it. Set the plane to be a collision object and the cube to be a soft body object. Give that cube some subdivisions in edit mode as well so that it can wobble and has some vertices to move around. Make sure your cube is positioned right above the plane. To make this look the most realistic, we want to maintain real world scaling, so let's just scale this all down until we're at more realistic size. Jelly is pretty easy to cut, so we won't be needing much force. Keep that in mind as you model a knife and animate it. Keyframing and animation's pretty simple. You may want to cut something for reference, but just move, rotate, and keyframe with I until you get something like this. In my testing for this tutorial, I found that a faster slice can work pretty well and is a lot simpler. In this example, I just swapped between a full cube and two soft body halves on a single frame, and it looks fine. However, not many people are going to chop straight through jelly like it's a carrot. I'm going to animate my knife to be pretty slow like this. Now make sure everything lines up. The knife should hit the plane, the cube needs to be in the right spot for where you want your slice to occur, and the cube should be sitting right above the plane. Make the knife a collision object and decrease its outer thickness under the soft body and cloth menu. Because our simulation is scaled so small, either of these thickness values being too large will cause a lot of problems with our simulation. Make sure to check the outer thickness value on your plane too, because if it's too high then the cube will be pushed up at the start of the animation and appear to be floating. Now let's focus on the jelly. We need to make this cube more stiff and hold its shape better. We're going to do that with a combination of goal and edge settings in our soft body menu. Keeping goal enabled will allow you to animate an object and have the vertices follow, essentially making the vertices bind or attempt to hold to their original mesh position. That's why when you have goal enabled, a soft body will bounce in the air rather than completely falling. Now if we increase the stiffness, default, and minimum slider values, the shape of the cube will be held as the knife starts to pass through the cube. Increasing the dampening will make this a bit less volatile. By using this goal setting, the cube won't be affected by gravity or anything like that, so additional motion past the cube just sitting there will have to be hand animated. The edges menu defines the settings for how far edges of the mesh can stretch and compress. The only things we need to change here are the damp value to calm the simulation down, and the bending value to make them bend less and make this whole thing a bit more rigid. If at this point your knife still isn't pressing into the cube like you can see on screen here, then you may have to revisit the knife settings. Just for some reference, I'll put the collision knife settings and the soft body settings that I'm using up on screen, so you could try using these as a baseline and then tweak from there. Of course it will vary depending on the scale of your simulation, but here are these values anyway. The soft body modifier requires original data to simulate, so we aren't able to dynamically update the mesh. We can erase part of our mesh for a cut with a Boolean though. Duplicate your knife, delete the keyframes, and parent it to the original knife object. Then hop into edit mode. Select the top of the knife and drag it up a ways. Also, make your knife a little bit thicker, that way the Boolean will cut outside of the edges of our collision knife. Having the cut not be completely flush with the sides of the jelly will also help our simulation's stability later on. Now it should be moving with our knife object and should be slightly larger than our original knife object too. Going to the jelly cube, we're going to add in a Boolean modifier. Keep the type set to difference and select your duplicated large knife as the target object. Hide your second Boolean knife mesh, and now you should have your knife passing through the cube, leaving a cut behind. We also need to take the collision physics off of our knife Boolean object, just so we don't have problems later on. Now the last step to complete this simulation is definitely the hardest one, and that involves swapping out the regular model for a sliced model so that it can fall over and look like we actually cut the mesh. Pick the frame that you want this swap to take place on. You may want to use the M key on the outliner to mark said frame. Now we need to bake out our soft body information so that it's constant and won't change as we tweak other settings. Once that's done, we're going to duplicate the jelly cube and make sure our soft body information is baked on there as well. You should now have 2 of these cubes, both with the exact same motion. Hide one of them and apply the soft body modifier on your swap frame for the other. That way the mesh will hold the vertices position for the soft body simulation on this frame. Now we need to finish splitting them with this boolean and turn it into 2 separate meshes. I found that the easiest way to do this is by unhiding our target knife object, moving it down, applying the boolean, and then just moving the knife back. Now we can head into edit mode, select one of the split pieces in wireframe to make sure we get the whole thing, and use P to separate it into 2 objects. The inside faces of the cut will be a little messy, so we'll have to clean those up a bit. Delete those inside faces, merge any extra vertices you find on the edge together, and then grid fill the hole to fill it with some nice quad topology. Make sure to slide back and forth on these blend and span options just so you can get even density for your quads. We need to swap these on our target frame, and that's actually easily done by opening the visibility menu under the Object Properties tab. You can keyframe the Show in Viewport and Show in Renders toggle with the I key. Make sure that it is shown in the Viewport and Renders on the swap frame, and then disabled in Viewport and Renders before that. Now we need to do the same thing for the full jelly cube and just invert it. Show it in the viewport before the swap frame, and then as soon as we hit that frame marker, render it invisible by toggling these off. Keyframe this as you go, and you should end up with something that kind of works. Now the last thing for this is to make both of our pieces soft body objects, tweak their settings a bit, and make sure they aren't simulated before they appear so everything lines up. We can change the start of their simulation under the cache menu once we've made them soft bodies. Set that to your target marked frame. One of your pieces will have a cache already present from the original object depending on how you separated your mesh. Don't delete that cache, just use the plus button to add a new cache as we don't want to mess up our already baked files. An issue you might run into is that the pieces will flinch outwards from the knife when they are simulated. If you run into this problem, turn up the damping value of the knife and lower the thickness outer value. Now that that problem's taken care of, let's tweak some stuff on both of these pieces. The large one doesn't really need much work, just tweak to your liking. It's mostly just sitting there, so it acts pretty much like the jelly cube that we had before. Now for this small piece, if we want it to fall over, we'll need to disable the goal settings so that it won't try to hold to its original mesh position. From that, to make it hold its shape a little bit better, we can increase the bending value under our edges menu. If you are struggling to make this piece fall over, you can actually use weight painting on a vertex group and plug that into the control point under the soft body settings. The higher the weight for a vertex, the more weight that will actually translate to the soft body settings, so you can make it heavier at the bottom and lighter at the top, or vice versa. Now you may need quite a bit of fine tuning at this point to complete your simulation and have it actually line up and look good. I did have to delete my split pieces and restart some of the process to line things up again a couple of times. You also might have to edit things like collision margins, damping values, and friction values for both your collision and soft body objects. I found that lowering the speed on the simulation, particularly for the smaller piece that ends up falling over, can make this look better and more realistic. I've got one last trick. If you really just can't make this small piece to the side fall over, then add that collision modifier back to your Boolean knife object. This might make your simulation way less stable, and it has in the past, but it's also been the only way I've gotten this to tip over for some of my testing. So, there's that. Materials are pretty basic, obviously something metallic for the knife, and the jelly looks pretty good with just a color, low roughness, and a high transmission value. You might want to leave some residue on the knife with an animated mix factor between two roughness textures, or by doing some dynamic paint. I'd recommend putting an HDRI environment into this scene so that the knife and jelly can reflect something. Other than that, just go for whatever you want. This is a simulation video, not a lighting and environment video. If you want to support this channel, go ahead and leave a like on this video so more people can see it, and perhaps subscribe as well so you can stay informed about my future content. Also, I do have a Patreon in the description of this video where you can get early access to these videos and some project tutorial files and a few of my personal project files as well. So go check that out if you're feeling extra generous. Niswani and Don Hopkins, you guys are awesome. Thank you all for watching this, and have a great day.